Well, good morning, and here we are again. Today is January the 19th. We're going to be reading Psalms 19, Genesis chapter 42 through 43, Proverbs chapter number 19, and then we have an article that we're going to read, Our Biblical Right to Confrontation. Kind of a drastic title there, isn't it? We have read this before, and so we'll be reading it again. Our biblical right to confrontation. But now let's start right here in the book of Psalms, and Psalms chapter 19.
Psalm 19, to the chief musician, a psalm of David.
The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Day unto day utters speech, and night unto night reveals knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them he has set a tabernacle for the sun, which is like a bridegroom coming out of his chamber, and rejoices like a strong man to run its race. Its rising is from one end of heaven, and its circuit to the other end, and there is nothing hidden from its heat. The law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The statutes of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. More to be desired are they than gold, yea, than much fine gold, sweeter also than honey and the honeycomb. Moreover, by them your servant is warned, and in keeping them there is great reward. Who can understand his errors? Cleanse me from secret faults. Keep back your servant also from presumptuous sins. Let them not have dominion over me. Then I shall be blameless, and I shall be innocent of great transgression. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer.
Amen. Praise the Lord. We are going to turn in our Bibles clear to the very first book, the book of Genesis. Let's get there. I've got to get there myself. And we will be reading Genesis chapter 42 and chapter 43. Chapter 42. Here we are. Genesis chapter 42.
When Jacob saw that there was grain in Egypt, Jacob said to his sons,
Why do you look at one another? Indeed, I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down to that place and buy for us there, that we may live and not die.
So Joseph's 10 brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. But Jacob did not send Joseph's brother, Benjamin, with his brothers.
Lest some calamity befall him.
And the sons of Israel went to buy grain among those who journeyed, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. Now Joseph was governor over the land, and it was he who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed down before him, with their faces to the earth. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he acted as a stranger to them and spoke roughly to them.
Where do you come from?
From the land of Canaan to buy food.
So Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. Then Joseph remembered the dreams which he had dreamed about them.
You are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land.
No, my lord, but your servants have come to buy food.
We are all one man's sons. We are honest men. Your servants are not spies.
No, but you have come to see the nakedness of the land.
Your servants are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And in fact, the youngest is with our father today, and one is no more.
It is as I spoke to you, saying you are spies. In this manner you shall be tested. By the life of Pharaoh, you shall not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you, and let him bring your brother, and you shall be kept in prison, that your words may be tested to see whether there is any truth in you. Or else, by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies.
So he put them all together in prison 3 days. Then Joseph said to them the third day,
Do this and live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers be confined to your prison house. But you, go and carry grain for the famine of your houses, and bring your youngest brother to me, so your words will be verified, and you shall not die.
and they did so. Then they said to one another,
We are truly guilty concerning our brother, for we saw the anguish of his soul when he pleaded with us, and we would not hear. Therefore, this distress has come upon us.
And Reuben answered them,
Did I not speak to you, saying, Do not sin against the boy, and you would not listen? Therefore, behold, his blood is now required of us.
But they did not know that Joseph understood them, for he spoke to them through an interpreter. And he turned himself away from them and wept. Then he returned to them again and talked with them. And he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. Then Joseph gave a command to fill their sacks with grain, to restore every man's money to his sack, and to give them provisions for the journey. Thus he did for them. So they loaded their donkeys with the grain and departed from there. But as one of them opened his sack to give his donkey feed at the encampment, he saw his money, and there it was, in the mouth of his sack.
My money has been restored, and there it is, in my sack.
Then their hearts failed them, and they were afraid, saying to one another,
What is this that God has done to us?
Then they went to Jacob their father in the land of Canaan and told him all that had happened to them.
The man who is lord of the land spoke roughly to us and took us for spies of the country.
But we said to him, We are honest men. We are not spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no more, and the youngest is with our father this day in the land of Canaan.
Then the man, the lord of the country, said to us, By this I will know that you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers here with me. Take food for the famine of your households, and be gone. And bring your youngest brother to me, so I shall know that you are not spies, but that you are honest men. I will grant your brother to you, and you may trade in the land.
Then it happened as they emptied their sacks, that surprisingly, each man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when they and their father saw the bundles of money, they were afraid. And Jacob their father said to them,
You have bereaved me. Joseph is no more, Simeon is no more, and you want to take Benjamin. All these things are against me.
Then Reuben spoke to his father.
kill my 2 sons if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my hands, and I will bring him back to you.
My son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is left alone. If any calamity should befall him along the way in which you go, then you would bring down my gray hair with sorrow to the grave.
And now, chapter number 43.
Now the famine was severe in the land. And it came to pass, when they had eaten up the grain which they had brought from Egypt, that their father said to them,
Go back, buy us a little food.
But Judah spoke to him,
The man solemnly warned us, saying, You shall not see my face, unless your brother is with you. If you send our brother with us, we will go down and buy you food. But if you will not send him, we will not go down. For the man said to us, You shall not see my face, unless your brother is with you.
Why did you deal so wrongfully with me as to tell the man whether you had still another brother?
The man asked us pointedly about ourselves and our family, saying, Is your father still alive? Have you another brother? And we told him according to these words. Could we possibly have known that he would say, Bring your brother down?
Then Judah said to Israel his father,
Send the lad with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die. Both we and you, and also our little ones. I myself will be surety for him. From my hand you shall require him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever. For if we had not lingered, surely by now we would have returned the second time.
If it must be so, then do this. Take some of the best fruits of the land in your vessels, and carry down a present for the man. A little balm and a little honey, spices and myrrh, pistachio nuts and almonds. Take double money in your hand, and take back in your hand the money that was returned in the mouth of your sacks. Perhaps it was an oversight. Take your brother also, and arise, go back to the man. And may God Almighty give you mercy before the man, that he may release your other brother and Benjamin. If I am bereaved, I am bereaved.
So the men took that present and Benjamin, and they took double money in their hand, and arose and went down to Egypt, and they stood before Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the steward of his house,
Take these men to my home, and slaughter an animal and make ready, for these men will dine with me at noon.
Then the man did as Joseph ordered, and the man brought the men into Joseph's house. Now the men were afraid, because they were brought into Joseph's house.
It is because of the money, which was returned in our sacks the first time, that we are brought in, so that he may make a case against us and seize us, to take us as slaves with our donkeys.
When they drew near to the steward of Joseph's house, they talked with him at the door of the house.
Oh, sir, we indeed came down the first time to buy food, but it happened when we came to the encampment that we opened our sacks, and there each man's money was in the mouth of his sack, our money in full weight. So we have brought it back in our hand.
And we have brought down other money in our hands to buy food. We do not know who put our money in our sacks.
Peace be with you. Do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your father has given you treasure in your sacks. I had your money.
Then he brought Simeon out to them. So the man brought the men into Joseph's house and gave them water, and they washed their feet, and he gave their donkeys feed. Then they made the present ready for Joseph's coming at noon, for they heard that they would eat bread there. And when Joseph came home, they brought him the present, which was in their hand, into the house, and bowed down before him to the earth. Then he asked them about their well-being.
Is your father well? The old man of whom you spoke? Is he still alive?
Your servant, our father, is in good health. He is still alive.
And they bowed their heads down and prostrated themselves. Then he lifted his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son.
Is this your younger brother of whom you spoke to me? God be gracious to you, my son.
Now his heart yearned for his brother. So Joseph made haste and sought somewhere to weep. And he went into his chamber and wept there. Then he washed his face and came out, and he restrained himself.
Serve the bread.
So they set him a place by himself, and them by themselves, and the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because the Egyptians could not eat food with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination to the Egyptians. And they sat before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men looked in astonishment at one another. Then he took servings to them from before him. But Benjamin's serving was 5 times as much as any of theirs. So they drank and were merry with him.
Wow. Amazing stories in the Bible. Let's turn now in our Bible to the last reading, Bible reading for today, the book of Proverbs in chapter number 19. So we're going back to pretty much the middle of the Old Testament, the book of Proverbs, and today we will read Proverbs chapter 19.
Better is the poor who walks in his integrity than one who is perverse in his lips and is a fool. Also, it is not good for a soul to be without knowledge, and he sins who hastens with his feet. The foolishness of a man twists his way, and his heart frets against the Lord. Wealth makes many friends, but the poor is separated from his friend. A false witness will not go unpunished, and he who speaks lies will not escape. Many entreat the favor of the nobility, and every man is a friend to one who gives gifts. All the brothers of the poor hate him. How much more do his friends go far from him? He may pursue them with words, yet they abandon him. He who gets wisdom loves his own soul. He who keeps understanding will find good. A false witness will not go unpunished, and he who speaks lies shall perish. Luxury is not fitting for a fool, much less for a servant to rule over princes. The discretion of a man makes him slow to anger, and his glory is to overlook a transgression. The king's wrath is like the roaring of a lion, but his favor is like dew on the grass. A foolish son is the ruin of his father, and the contentions of a wife are a continual dripping. Houses and riches are an inheritance from fathers, but a prudent wife is from the Lord. Laziness casts one into a deep sleep, and an idle person will suffer hunger. He who keeps the commandment keeps his soul, but he who is careless of his ways will die. He who has pity on the poor lends to the Lord, and he will pay back what he has given. Chasten your son while there is hope, do not set your heart on his destruction. A man of great wrath will suffer punishment, for if you rescue him, you will have to do it again. Listen to counsel and receive instruction, that you may be wise in your latter days. There are many plans in a man's heart. Nevertheless, the Lord's counsel, that will stand. What is desired in a man is kindness, and a poor man is better than a liar. The fear of the Lord leads to life, and he who has it will abide in satisfaction. He will not be visited with evil. A lazy man buries his hand in the bowl, and will not so much as bring it to his mouth again. Strike a scoffer, and the simple will become wary. Rebuke one who is understanding, and he will discern knowledge. He who mistreats his father and chases away his mother is a son who causes shame and brings reproach. Cease listening to instruction, my son, and you will stray from the words of knowledge. A disreputable witness scorns justice, and the mouth of the wicked devours iniquity. Judgments are prepared for scoffers, and beatings for the backs of fools.
And that is the readings for today. Right out of the Bible, we have one additional writing here, our biblical right to confrontation. It is found right in the chapter 19 that we just read, but now it comes from Proverbs 18 in Proverbs 18 and verse number 17. The first to plead his case seems right, until another comes and examines him. And so, here it is, our biblical right to confrontation. Freedom is never so precious as when you realize you no longer have it. Justice is never so important as it is when you seek it and it cannot be found. It may never seem quite so remarkable as when it is found in the hands of someone more powerful than you. What then? Because so many of us have grown up at a time in which the foundations of freedom and justice have already been laid, and our rights and privileges have long been established and regularly enjoyed, we may not have a true sense of appreciation for just how amazing they are and where they come from. To a large degree today, we take our freedom and the ability to secure justice for granted. But for most people in the past, and many still today, such luxuries were and are not common. If it was not for the Bible and its profound shaping influence on the founding of America and the drafting of its essential governing documents, it's doubtful we would enjoy the freedom we do, or that school children would even know the phrase, with liberty and justice for all. In the Bible, courts exist for the purpose of securing justice. In light of that, the Founding Fathers saw fit to add 10 amendments to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, of which 5 addressed specific means of securing that justice. Called the due process clauses, they include provisions such as the right to be safe from intrusive searches, to have a public trial, attorney, and a jury, to be free from self-incrimination or torture, to confront accusing witnesses, to call witnesses in one's defense. Where did those rights come from? Specifically, the Bible. Each of those provisions was biblically based and received special attention in the Geneva Bible, the version regularly carried to the shores of America by those persecuted in England and Europe for their religious beliefs. It's hard to overstate the impact that the Geneva Bible had in directly shaping America in areas ranging from education to civil government, private property to civil rights, and free enterprise to the courts. So much so, it is not surprising that the Geneva Bible is repeatedly featured in paintings of the early colonists, including as the centerpiece of the painting of the Pilgrims that hangs in the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol. The Geneva Bible, so called because it was first printed in 1560 in Geneva, Switzerland. The Geneva Bible was the work of some 24 religious leaders whom God raised up across Europe in the 1300s, 1400s, and 1500s. Leaders who called into question the practices of church and state that did not conform to the Scriptures. Although the Geneva Bible was a relatively large 6 inches by 8 inches in size, it was still called a pocket Bible because individuals could own and carry one of them for personal use. Previous editions of the Bible had been huge and unwieldy, with some being over 2 feet in height, termed pulpit Bibles. They were often literally chained to the pulpits of churches. The objective for the Geneva Bible was twofold. One, to get people to read and study the Bible for themselves rather than allowing someone else to tell them what it supposedly said. And 2, to use the Bible to shape culture, to reflect God's principles rather than vice versa. And vice versa had been the case for the previous millennia. The Geneva Bible was the most popular Bible of that era, going through 140 reprints from 1560 to 1644. A distinctive characteristic of this Bible was its marginal commentaries, largely the work of persecuted religious leaders, including those driven from Great Britain during the reigns of Bloody Mary and James I, 2 monarchs who advocated the divine right of kings and the authority of the state over the church. These marginal commentaries often pointed out where culture customs differed from scriptural teachings, including how British and European judicial practices differed from scriptural precepts. So impacting and insightful were these marginal notes in the early colonial and founding era that they shaped much of America's judicial policies. A current federal legal text, Federal Practices and Procedure, Federal Rules of Evidence, provides several instances of this. For example, when some leaders wanted to arrest Jesus, the Geneva Bible records the comments of one of the Pharisee leaders, and I quote, "Nicodemus, who had gone to him before, and who was one of them, said to them, 'Does our law judge a man without first giving him a hearing and learning what he does?'" James 7 and verse number 51. Unquote. Thus, the arrangement of a defendant and his right to know the official charges being preferred against him was a proper part of the legal process. The U.S. Constitution's provision regarding the judicial right of confrontation, the right of a defendant to bring out the rest of the story by cross-examination, by cross-examining an accuser or even calling witnesses to testify in his own behalf. It's rooted in the principle found in Proverbs 18:17, which states, "The first to plead his case seems right, until another comes and examines him." The biblical basis for such a protective right is evidenced by the same federal legal text referenced above that cites 3 additional examples from the Geneva Bible that further illustrate this right of confrontation. Please note that the quotations within the text below are from the actual Geneva Bible, and thus hundreds of years old, which is why many spellings will seem unusual to today's readers. While the quotation is lengthy, we deemed its inclusion valuable for enabling readers to better understand the source and base for these judicial rights. As the text explains, and I quote, "After having been mobbed in the temple by those who thought he had desecrated it, Paul was recused by the Romans and taken before the Sanhedrin. In a letter to the Roman governor, the Roman tribune explained his actions. And when I would have known the cause, wherefore they accused me, I brought him forthwith into this council. There I perceived that he was accused of questions of their law, but had no crime worthy of death or of bonds. But fearing that his enemies might attack Paul, I sent him straightway to thee, and commanded his accusers to speak before thee the things that they had against him. After his transfer to Caesarea, Paul was confronted with his accusers in a hearing before the Roman governor Felix. At this hearing, Ananias, the high priest, and the elders, with the assistance of an orator, apparently the equivalent of a lawyer, named Tertullus, appeared to prosecute Paul. Tertullus told the governor, "We have found this man a pestilent fellow, and a mover of sedition, and a chief maintainer of the sect of the Nazarites, who hath gone about to pollute the temple." Paul denied the charge and challenged his accusers to prove the things whereof they now accuse him. After explaining his actions in the temple, he, Paul, pointed out that there were witnesses with personal knowledge of his actions, who ought to have been present before thee and accuse me if they had aught against me. Unquote. At this point, the Geneva Bible adds a note further remonstrating on the hearsay nature of the evidence against Paul, and I quote, "For his accusers spake but upon a false report, which these bestowed of Satan had blown abroad, and durst not themselves appear." Unquote. Festus laid Paul's case before King Agrippa, explaining that Paul's enemies were still demanding his punishment. Festus continued, and I quote, "To whom I answered that it is not the manner of the Romans for favor to deliver a man to the death before that he which is accused have the accusers before him, and have place to defend himself concerning the crime." Unquote. A second Bible passage relevant to the right of confrontation is the well-known but non-canonical tale of Jesus and the anonymous woman taken in adultery. The scribes and the Pharisees allegedly tried to tempt Jesus to depart from the Mosaic law, brought the accused adulteress before him, told him that she had been caught in the act, and asked what should be done with her. The correct answer was A, she should be stoned to death. Jesus, however, refused to step into the trap and gave the famous but apparently apocryphal reply, and I quote, "Let him that is among you without sin cast the first stone at her." Unquote. At this point, the story goes, her accusers slunk off one by one, leaving Jesus alone with the woman. The Geneva Bible continues, and I quote, "When Jesus had left up himself again, and saw no man but the woman, he said to her, Woman, where are those thine accusers? Hath no man condemned thee? She said, No man, Lord. And Jesus said, Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more." Unquote. A popular manual for justices of the peace cited this passage for the proposition that no man is to be condemned without an accuser. But this makes sense only if accuser means someone willing to face the accused and make the accusation. It's obvious from the Bible passage that there were, in fact, accusers, but they had refused to confront the accused when it became apparent that this would require them to open their own character to impeachment. Hence, one could read this passage as supporting a right of confrontation. The third episode in the New Testament that is relevant to the right of confrontation is the trials of Jesus. The synoptics are in remarkable agreement on the relevant details. Jesus was first taken before the Sanhedrin, where his enemies sought false witnesses who could provide evidence of a capital offense. But they found none, though many false witnesses came, partly because their testimony did not show any crime, partly because their witness agreed not together. When they finally found 2 witnesses to accuse Jesus of blasphemy, then the chief priest arose and said to him, "Answerest thou nothing? What is the matter? What is the matter that these men witness against thee?" But Jesus held his peace. On further questioning, Jesus answered simply, "Thou hast said it," but eventually gave answers that were construed as blasphemous. He was then taken before Pilate, where he again gave non-responsive answers. "Thou saidst it," as an example. Quote, "And when he was accused of the chief priests and elders, he answered nothing. Then said Pilate unto him, Hearest thou not how many things they lay against thee? But he answered him not one word, insomuch that the governor marveled greatly." Unquote. Commentators saw in it a justification for their refusal to take the oath ex officio, or self-incrimination. But if we turn to the account of Jesus' trials in John, the linkage between confrontation and self-incrimination becomes even stronger. John adds this to the appearance before the Sanhedrin, and I quote, "Jesus answered the high priest who was questioning him, I spake openly to the world. I ever taught in the synagogue and in the temple, and in secret I have said nothing. Why ask thou me? Ask them which heard me what I said unto them. Behold, they know what I said." In the latter appearance before Pilate, John adds the telling detail that his accusers remained outside for religious reasons, so that Jesus was denied confrontation before the Roman governor. John relates that Jesus answered them, "Sayest thou that of thyself, or did other tell it thee of me?" Pilate ignored the pointed inquiry into the hearsay nature of his knowledge, but readers of these 2 passages in John might plausibly have supposed that another reason for his refusal to answer the question put to him by Pilate is that Jesus was denied the right to confront his accusers. This interpretation is strengthened if we add a passage from Luke's account of the appearance before the Sanhedrin. Jesus, being questioned about the accusation of blasphemy, said unto them, If I tell you, ye will not believe it. And if also I ask you, ye will not answer me, nor let me go. Whatever this may have meant to John, it can be read, at least by modern eyes, as a claim of denial of cross-examination or of the right to make a defense. The Tanakh, or as it is known in the Bible, the Old Testament, has considerably more legal passages than are found in the Christian sources, including rules dealing with evidence. In the account of Paul's arrest in Jerusalem, we see the Bible examples of the right of a defendant to confront his accusers, the use of a lawyer to prosecute, a listing of the charges, the demand for due process and finishing proof, the right to call witnesses, and the objection to the admission of hearsay. In the case of the woman caught in adultery, we see the woman's right to confront her accusers. And when there was no one willing to come forward and face the accused, the charges were dismissed. In Jesus' own trial, we see Jesus' not responsive answers as his exercising what we have come to know as the Fifth Amendment, listed in the Bill of Rights. The right to avoid self-incrimination, not being compelled to be a witness against himself. That the commentators also note he was denied the right to confront his accusers. The challenge to hearsay evidence was ignored. And Jesus was denied the right of cross-examination or the right to make a defense, or all evidence of just how much of our judicial process and practice find their origin and base in the Bible. Many of these biblical judicial practices were abandoned during the millennia known as the Dark Ages, replaced with reprehensible practices in the courts of the Inquisition, and later the modified Admiralty courts, courts of High Commission, and courts of Star Chamber. In those courts, the same individual served as judge, prosecutor, and jury. With no check and balance, a charged individual was always assumed to be guilty. Any person could be charged with a crime without his accuser being known. Those making the accusations were kept secret, and hearsay evidence was accepted. Confronting the accuser was not permitted, and attorneys were not allowed to offer a defense. And an individual could not only be compelled to give testimony against himself, but torture was also permissible to obtain that confession. The teachings of the Geneva Bible that contrasted proper judicial practices with these types of wicked ones became deeply inculcated in American thinking. Thus, when Americans separated from Great Britain and had opportunity to create their own governments, they specifically placed biblical due process protections directly into their state constitutions, including the right of confrontation. For example, and I quote, that in all capital or criminal prosecutions a man hath a right to be confronted with the accusers and witnesses, and to call for evidence in his favor. Virginia, 1776. That in all prosecutions for criminal offenses, every man hath a right to be confronted with the accusers or witnesses and to examine evidence on oath in his favor. Delaware, 1776. That in all prosecutions for criminal offenses, a man hath a right to be confronted with the witnesses and to call for evidence in his favor. Virginia, 1786. Unquote. And when the federal Constitution was written, the Sixth Amendment likewise stipulated, and I quote, "In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to be confronted with the witnesses against him and to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor." Unquote. This admirable feature regarding the right of confrontation is just one of the many provisions of American law directly shaped by the Bible. Incidentally, the monarchs of the 1500s and 1600s who practiced the judicial abuses condemned in the Geneva Version did not appreciate the censor those commentaries leveled against them. One of those monarchs was King James I, whose courts had been especially harsh on those who did not conform to his established church doctrines. Disliking the Geneva Bible and its commentaries, he therefore authorized the funding of a new translation of the Bible about 1600. It was published in 1611, known as the King James Bible. It was translated from essentially the same manuscripts as the Geneva Bible, but it removed all the Reformers' commentaries, thus silencing the dissenting voice. In fact, the Geneva Bible's specific commentary note on Acts 24:20 that Paul's accusers spake but upon a false report, which was hearsay and therefore not permitted, was in direct contradiction to the practices in James' own courts, which permitted accuser by hearsay. Understandably, King James did not wish to see such commentaries in his Bible. Not surprisingly, the King James Bible became the official version of many British monarchs, and Great Britain made it illegal for British colonies to print a Bible in the English language, thus placing the printing of all English language Bibles under the supervision of the Crown, which promoted the King James Version, not the Geneva Bible. This is not to say that the King James Version is not a good or worthy version to read today. It is. But its history is largely unknown to modern Christians. When one thinks of the lasting legacy and the staggering impact of the Geneva Bible, complete with the notes and commentaries from the Reformers, who questioned and challenged many of the principles and practices of the Crown, and who it was this version of the Bible that first graced the shores of this country back at the founding of the Jamestown colony and with the Pilgrims of the Plymouth colony. We owe a deep debt of gratitude to those who first began to wrestle with the Word of God for themselves, refusing to simply accept what others declared it to say, and choose to respond to the voice of freedom calling from within its pages. If it was not for them and their passion for the truth and courage to challenge the status quo, we might not be living in the land of the free and the home of the brave. Let us freshly examine the evidence in this case as to what are the true foundations of this country. What is its accurate history and its true spiritual heritage? We have a right to face our accusers, to call forth testimony from the eyewitnesses themselves, to reject the modern hearsay. Such is our biblical right to confrontation. And that is the reading, the special reading that we have today, our biblical right to confrontation. Amen. Kind of a lengthy reading, but well worth understanding. God bless you. Have an amazing rest of your day, and we will see you again tomorrow.